The sun was barely rising over the manicured lawns of Willow Creek Estates, the kind of gated suburban neighborhood where the grass was clipped to regulation height, and the mailboxes all looked like they'd been ordered from the same catalog. From the outside, it was picture perfect. White fences, pastel shutters, and the faint smell of coffee drifting from kitchen windows. But perfection has a way of hiding rot beneath the surface. I had just come home from deployment 2 months earlier. After 15 years serving as a Navy SEAL, I'd finally promised my wife, Emily, that I'd step back, put down roots, and give her the quiet family life she deserved. We bought a modest 2-story home with a wide porch, the kind of place where we could raise our newborn daughter, Grace. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But peace never lasts long, not for people like me. The HOA president, Karen Whitfield, was waiting for us before we'd even fully unpacked. She was a middle-aged woman with immaculately styled blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and a smile so polished it looked like it had been painted on. Behind that smile was steel. She ran the HOA like a drill sergeant, only nastier. Every mailbox color, every garbage can placement, every holiday decoration had to pass through her approval. People whispered about her behind closed doors, but when she walked the street, they stiffened like recruits under inspection. At first, she kept her distance. We thought we might be spared. But the moment Emily brought Grace home from the hospital, Karen struck. It was a crisp morning in early fall. Emily sat on the porch swing, cradling our daughter, humming softly. I was inside fixing coffee when I heard the sharp clip of heels on the walkway. By the time I stepped outside, Karen was already looming over Emily. "What a beautiful baby," Karen cooed, leaning in too close, her perfume sharp enough to sting my nose. "You know, children are the heartbeat of this community. The HOA takes a special interest in them." Emily glanced at me, unsettled. "She's our daughter," she said carefully. "We'll take good care of her." Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes glinted cold. "Well, the HOA has rules. Infants here must be registered. You'll need to provide her birth certificate, medical records, vaccination schedule, and of course, access for routine wellness checks." My chest tightened. "Excuse me?" I asked, stepping closer. Karen turned her head slowly, as if I'd just interrupted her rehearsed speech. "It's standard. Every family complies. It ensures our children meet the neighborhood's standards of health and safety. You wouldn't want your little girl to fall behind." Emily hugged Grace tighter, her knuckles whitening. "She's not a community project. She's our child." Karen's painted smile thinned. "That's where you're mistaken. In Willow Creek Estates, we share responsibility. If you can't meet our expectations, perhaps you're not suited for this neighborhood." She said it like a threat, like our newborn wasn't even ours to protect. In that moment, a cold, familiar calm settled over me. I'd heard threats before. I'd faced men with bombs strapped to their chests. But I never thought I'd come home to fight a war in my own front yard. And Karen had no idea who she'd just picked a fight with. The days that followed were like living under surveillance. Every time I stepped outside, Karen seemed to materialize, walking her yappy Pomeranian, checking mailboxes, or strolling by with a clipboard tucked under her arm. Her smile never reached her eyes, and I knew she was waiting, probing for weakness. Emily grew uneasy. She couldn't take Grace for a walk without Karen bumping into her, peppering her with invasive questions. How many ounces is she drinking? Is she sleeping through the night yet? Has she been enrolled in the HOA infant enrichment program? Emily's patience wore thin. "She's 3 weeks old, Karen," she snapped once, clutching Grace's stroller like a lifeline. "She doesn't need enrichment. She needs her parents." Karen only tilted her head. "Poor dear. She's already falling behind." That night, as I rocked Grace in my arms, Emily whispered what we both knew. "This isn't just nosiness. She wants control." I tried to brush it off. "We've dealt with worse." But my gut told me Karen wasn't the type to back down. I was right. 2 mornings later, a notice appeared taped to our front door. Notice of noncompliance. Failure to submit infant registration documents constitutes a violation of Willow Creek policy. Daily fines will accrue until compliance is met. Failure to resolve may result in escalation to community arbitration. Arbitration. That was HOA code for, "Hand us what we want, or we'll drag you through hell." I tore the paper down and crumpled it in my fist. Emily's voice shook when she asked, "What if she calls CPS?" That thought gnawed at me. Karen couldn't just take our baby, could she? In this country, in this neighborhood, with the right influence, people could twist rules into weapons. I'd seen warlords do the same thing overseas, hiding behind law and order. And Karen was just getting started. The next day, while Emily napped with Grace, I caught two HOA board members, middle-aged men in polo shirts, standing at the edge of our lawn, snapping pictures of our windows and porch. I stormed out. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" They flinched like kids caught stealing. "Just, documenting. Routine inspection," one stammered. "On my property." I stepped closer, letting the steel in my voice drop. "Put the camera down. Now." They muttered excuses and hurried off, but the damage was done. The message was clear. Karen had backup. That night, Emily broke down at the kitchen table. "This was supposed to be our safe place," she said, tears streaking her face. "I can't even sit on the porch with my daughter without feeling like she's being hunted." I pulled her into my arms. "She won't touch Grace. I promise you that." But even as I said it, I felt the storm gathering. Karen wasn't just power-hungry. She was obsessed. And when obsession met authority, people got hurt. And for the first time since leaving the battlefield, I felt the old instincts stirring in me. The calm, the readiness. The part of me that knew how to fight a war. Because this wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. This was about protecting my family. And I was prepared to burn the whole system down if I had to. The morning Karen chose to act felt like the calm before a thunderhead. The air had that low, charged quality. Everything smelled sharper, sounds held longer. I'd been awake half the night, watching routes, mapping exits in my head, doing the things you do when your training suddenly becomes household defense. I hadn't told Emily everything. I wanted her mind clean for the baby, not filled with military ghosts. But I'd prepped. I had eyes on the driveway, a burner phone with contacts I didn't normally touch, and a quiet resolve that had nothing to do with bravado. Then the black SUVs rolled up. They didn't have official decals, but they had the look. Tinted glass, 3 men in plain suits, an air of officialness that made the neighborhood parents glance from their morning coffee to their phones. Karen walked in front of them like a queen leading a parade. Hair perfect, blazer crisp, a community liaison badge pinned to her lapel, as if legitimacy could be sewed on. "You have no right," Emily said from the porch, standing between Karen and the baby, as if she were a shield made of skin and instinct. "Emily, dear," Karen purred. "This is for Grace's safety. We received reports of irregularities, unregistered infant, lack of documentation. These gentlemen are here to perform a welfare check. For the protection of the child." She extended her hand toward one of the men. He stepped forward and spoke in a calm, slow voice that tried for neutrality but missed. "We're just going to take a look, ma'am. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." My jaw tightened. "You'll need a court order," I said, every syllable low. He smiled like a man who had rehearsed that expression. "We're authorized under community ordinance to ensure welfare when community members raise concerns." He glanced at his partner who held a tablet. Names, timestamps, pre-filled boxes. They'd weaponized paperwork. The morning Karen chose to act felt like the calm before a thunderhead. The air had that low, charged quality. Everything smelled sharper, sounds held longer. I'd been awake half the night, watching routes, mapping exits in my head, doing the things you do when your training suddenly becomes household defense. I hadn't told Emily everything. I wanted her mind clean for the baby, not filled with military ghosts. But I'd prepped. I had eyes on the driveway, a burner phone with contacts I didn't normally touch, and a quiet resolve that had nothing to do with bravado. Then the black SUVs rolled up. They didn't have official decals, but they had the look. Tinted glass, 3 men in plain suits, an air of officialness that made the neighborhood parents glance from their morning coffee to their phones. Karen walked in front of them like a queen leading a parade. Hair perfect, blazer crisp, a community liaison badge pinned to her lapel, as if legitimacy could be sewed on. "You have no right," Emily said from the porch, standing between Karen and the baby, as if she were a shield made of skin and instinct. "Emily, dear," Karen purred. "This is for Grace's safety. We received reports of irregularities, unregistered infant, lack of documentation. These gentlemen are here to perform a welfare check. For the protection of the child." She extended her hand toward one of the men. He stepped forward and spoke in a calm, slow voice that tried for neutrality but missed. We're just going to take a look, ma'am. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. My jaw tightened. You'll need a court order, I said, every syllable low. He smiled like a man who had rehearsed that expression. We're authorized under community ordinance to ensure welfare when community members raise concerns. He glanced at his partner who held a tablet, names, timestamps, pre-filled boxes. They'd weaponized paperwork. Emily's face went ashen. You can't just. Karen cut her off. We can. We will. For the good of Willow Creek. Then she reached, as if to take grace. Everything in me narrowed. Time, sound, motion, the world reduced to the arc of Karen's arm and the soft weight of my daughter in Emily's arms. For a flash I saw the boy in me, the man who used to move through hostile compounds with silence and precision. I didn't want to be that man here, but I would be if I had to. I stepped forward, slow so as not to escalate, hands open to show no aggression. Back up, I said. My voice was calm, so calm it made Karen hesitate. You step any closer, you will be on our property unlawfully. Karen's eyes darted to the man. He's unstable, she declared. He's a veteran. This is exactly why we acted. That was the trigger. She would use my service against me. She would turn badge into cudgel, paint protection as an excuse to take what we loved. One of the suited men made a move toward my wife. That was all I needed. I moved like I had 100 times before, but quicker because this wasn't theater. This was my home. I didn't shout. I didn't cock a gun or throw a punch. I stepped between him and Emily, palm to his chest, and pushed an old-fashioned disarm, a shove that sent him backward into the SUV door with a metallic clang. The second man reached for his radio. The first stumbled, dazed. A neighbor gasped. Someone else started filming. Karen's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Call the police, she barked. The queen turned general. The suits recovered, lunging. For a moment, it was a mess of flailing limbs, a stroller tipped, Grace's soft cry splitting the morning. I felt time compress, options folding until there was only one clear line: protect the baby. I grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her inside, yanking the door shut with force I didn't know I had left. I bolted the deadbolt and threw my weight against it as shouting swelled on the porch. The glass rattled with fists. The SUV doors thudded. Through the slats of the blinds, I watched Karen's face, furious and amazed. She'd provoked the wrong soldier. She'd poked at the wrong family. I heard a voice on someone's phone. He assaulted a community official. And then the thin, urgent ring of an actual police cruiser siren in the distance. The suits were calling for law. The law was coming. I sat on the floor, knees braced, hearing Grace's crying layered over Emily's sobs. The adrenaline in me roared, then receded into a hot, steady burn. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something older, a containment, the knowledge that the fight was no longer just about paperwork. Karen had stepped over a line, and we'd crossed into the kind of danger that didn't end with a fine. Outside, Karen barked orders like a field commander. Inside, Emily held Grace up to me, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to the small, perfect face of our daughter. I whispered, "I've got you." And the words were iron and prayer at once. There was no cheering. There was only the dist. The police lights washed the living room blinds in staccato red and blue, making a trembling, fractured pattern across the hardwood. Two officers in dark uniforms took statements, their faces polite but wary. This was Willow Creek, after all, and they'd seen more HOA disputes than violent raids. The suits from the SUVs insisted they were conducting community welfare, but their story faltered under the weight of video and witnesses. A neighbor's doorbell camera had captured most of the confrontation. The shove, the SUV, Karen's theatrical approach. Pixels that refused to be rewritten. Detective Morales, a compact woman with a tired smile and a voice that cut through nonsense, put a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Ma'am, you did what any parent would do," she said quietly. "We'll sort out the rest. Right now, the important thing is your daughter is safe." Emily sobbed, a raw sound that emptied the room of anything performative. I held Grace in my arms like someone holding a last fragile light, and for a moment, all the old battlefields fell away. War had taught me to survive. Fatherhood was teaching me to stay. Karen was escorted to a police car under a swirl of murmurs and outrage. She protested loudly about community standards and public safety, but the cameras had recorded her too. The way she smiled when the men in suits arrived, the way she'd pinned a badge on herself like costume jewelry. Her words, once gilded with authority, now sounded like a bad actor trying to salvage a script. In the days that followed, Willow Creek's neatly printed newsletters shifted tone. The HOA board convened emergency meetings. An independent review was demanded. Karen took a leave of absence that smelled of forced retirement. The suit men claimed they were private security hired by a concerned group, and their contract evaporated under scrutiny. We filed no extravagant lawsuits. Emily wanted peace more than vindication. But we did take action: a restraining order against Karen and those private operatives, a formal complaint to the county about harassment, and a petition that demanded accountability from the HOA board. The community, shaken, divided into camps. Some swore loyalty to order. Others swore loyalty to basic human dignity. What surprised me was the neighbors who knocked on our door with casseroles and apologies. The silence of conformity had been loud, but people's hearts were quieter and more honest than Karen had assumed. Therapy was harder than any mission. The SEAL training that shaped my bones didn't teach me how to ask for help or answer questions no one in uniform had time to hear. Emily held my hand through those sessions, steady as a lighthouse. We learned to talk about fear without letting it rule us, to show our daughter a world where justice wasn't a headline but a promise. On a late autumn evening, months after the incident, the neighborhood gathered for a block party. It was tentative at first, small groups, wary smiles, but laughter, awkward and then genuine, began to seep back. Grace crawled across a picnic blanket, an unabashed conqueror of grass and dirt and small toys. A neighbor I'd never spoken to pulled me aside and said, "We were wrong to let her run things. Thank you for standing up." I shrugged. It's what anyone would do. Maybe that was true. Maybe every parent would stand up. But the more honest answer was that I had other tools. Training had given me a reflex to protect, but something else had taught me restraint. The knowledge that violence begets violence, that victory on the outside means nothing if the inside has been hollowed. A month later, Karen's name lingered in legal filings and gossip threads, but she was no longer the unassailable figure on the sidewalk. Accountability had a way of stripping off the gloss. The HOA implemented clearer rules, oversight, and a clause that forbade community wellness from being used as a pretext for harassment. The bylaws were never glamorous, but they mattered. They were, in their own small way, a defense. At home, we painted Grace's room a soft, triumphant blue. We left a window open at night and listened to the distant hum of the neighborhood, the air conditioner, a dog's bark, the faraway laugh of children. Life held its fragile, ordinary rhythms. Not every wrong was righted, not every scar smoothed. But every morning when Emily handed Grace to me, when the soft weight settled into my arms, I felt an irrevocable thing, a duty deeper than orders, quieter than medals. I'd sworn an oath to defend my country. Now, I'd sworn another, to defend this small, imperfect island of our own making. The battlefield had changed, but the fight hadn't. And when push came to shove, in a suburban street of clipped lawns and anonymous fences, I'd chosen my family. Grace gurgled in sleep, and I watched her like a man looking at a map of tomorrow. Outside, the streetlights blinked on, ordinary and steadfast.